And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Kim Davis. And yes, it's early for Chalk Talk. We'll call it Chalk Talk over coffee. Today is Tuesday, June the 4th. It's the 4th day of June. Can you believe it, guys? We have made it to June. It is also the start of hurricane season, but we're not going to even focus on that. Welcome to Chalk Talk. The Houston Texans are in minicamp this week, so we're doing Chalk Talk a little bit early. See how many of you get up and decide to spend a little time with us this morning over Chalk Talk. And I mentioned that the Houston Texans are in minicamp. The last few weeks, they've been in OTAs. I'll let you hear from players and coaches later this week, maybe even some today, just from some of the interviews from last week. But we're going to talk about really like the big story in sports right now. You know, it's quite frankly the story around Caitlin Clark and of the Indiana Fever, the WNBA. And I want to talk about it. And, you know, this word has come up recently and add some nuance and context to the conversation. So just a little bit of history for those of you who don't know. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm Kim Davis, your host. But I've also covered the WNBA a really long time. And two of the Houston Comets championship seasons, I was a part of their broadcast team. So I've always had a fondness for the WNBA. I've seen the evolution of the league. And let me just go back to in the year 2000 and, when in the early part of the league, the Houston Comets won 4 championships in a row. Shout out to that team, Cheryl Swoops and Cynthia Cooper and Tina Thompson and Kim Perrott before she passed away, and so many others, right? Those games back then were in the Houston Summit. You know, it is now, if you live in Houston, if you're new to the city, it is now the building that is Lakewood Church. But that used to be the basketball arena for the Houston Rockets and also the Houston Comets. They would sell that arena out on a regular basis. It was rocking. People were showing up. It was fun times in the city. And, you win 4 championships. That's pretty exciting, right? They won the first 4 championships during the league. It's kind of an indictment on where we are if you think about now that the city doesn't even have a WNBA team. But that's a conversation for another show. My point is, women's basketball has been around. People have enjoyed it over the years. There have been ebbs and flows. And so that all has to do with a number of things. But there have been amazing players for many, many, many years. And so we fast forward to 2024 and the excitement around the young Caitlin Clark, the guard from Iowa, who had a phenomenal collegiate career. I mean, she broke all sorts of records, not just records for women, but records for basketball players, men and women, right? She, shooting records, 3-point records. She got a lot of people who previously had not been following women's college basketball and women's basketball, some new eyeballs on the sport. That's the good part, right? And I think that's what's really exciting. And any of us who care about women's sports, who've covered it, followed it, you're excited that more people are coming to the game by whatever means necessary. So she goes through 2 years in a row in her junior and senior seasons in collegiate basketball, where she got to the championship of women's college basketball, and was defeated in the first year by LSU, the second year by South Carolina. So she's never won a championship. Takes nothing away from the fact that she's really good. But now she's in the WNBA, a professional league with women who have been doing this for a minute. And she has garnered a lot of attention, right? There are people who are making these blanket statements like, she's there and now people are watching the league and the women should be glad that she's there. They should treat her special. And I'm exaggerating with the treat her special, but like she is the savior of the league. Have some things happen since she's been in the league in terms of, more eyeballs on the league this year. In some cases, absolutely. There's talk, they're closer to getting these chartered jets and flights, something that the WNBA has been working on for 5 years. So I just think we have to be careful about crediting all of that to Caitlin Clark. But absolutely, her being in the league is a benefit. And these women who are playing in the league, who do this for a career and have been doing this don't have any problem, I'm sure. I have not done a poll or taken a survey with any of the benefits that come from Caitlin Clark being a part of the WNBA. So, but the problem is, it's where sports and society meet. Okay. That's where some of the challenges have come in. That's where you've got to have some nuance and add some context. And one of the things I often talk about on my show is the intersection of sports and society. It happens, and sometimes it gets in the way of one gets in the way of the other. So the conversation around Caitlin Clark, and we're going to go to specifically this past weekend, a play that got everybody talking, or a lot of people, where the Fever was playing the Chicago Sky. Kennedy Carter of the Sky, it was an off the ball foul that was, at the time, it was a personal foul. It was later upgraded to a flagrant one. It was you could say a non-basketball play. It's not what you want to see, but it's not like those plays have never happened. But it was with Caitlin Clark, and it was highlighted over the weekend. In fact, the Chicago Tribune did a whole editorial about this, and they had in their headline, they said that what Kennedy Carter did to Caitlin Clark was assault. Okay, see, that's the problem. That is one of the issues that happens with media when you just go too far. You're just doing too much. Because do you watch the NBA? Do you watch hockey? Do you watch the NFL? Come on, don't call that assault. It was a flagrant foul, and it was called as such. But I will point this out. It's because Rebecca Lobo, I saw her earlier on another show this morning, and I made the point that last year there were 65 flagrant fouls called in the WNBA. Not like it never happens. No one's condoning the foul that Kennedy Carter had on against Caitlin Clark. I'm sure Kennedy, that's not a good look for her, right? That's not the way they want to play. But don't make that be some kind of indictment on women in the WNBA, how they're not grateful, and they should be treating Clark differently, and her teammates should be standing up, and they should be fighting. These are the kind of things I've been hearing over the past few days from some fans, some media people, and quite frankly, from men who have not really covered the sport. When I say haven't covered the sport, because you cover and talk about some championships, you talk about some key stories, that's great. But I'm talking about day in, day out covering the sport and understanding what's going on in the game. So the conversation around Caitlin Clark, and I want to talk about this specifically because we get to do this here on Chalk Talk. And welcome to all of you who are tuning in for coffee this morning. There was a conversation yesterday on a national show on ESPN with a basketball analyst, Monica McNutt, who does a really solid job. Right. She also is an analyst for the New York Knicks. She's a part of their broadcast team. She's a part of ESPN's coverage on some WNBA games. She is an analyst when it comes to women's basketball and men's basketball, and she's really very well respected. Okay, so she's on the show yesterday morning, and the conversation, they're talking about this issue that happened over the weekend. And her point, as I kind of boil it down, because it was a 40-minute conversation that got really heated, but she did a great job of standing her ground on what she believed from what she's seen and what she's covered. So I'm gonna put a pin in it right there. I appreciate that because I understand it, right? When you're at the table and you're having conversations passionately about sports as a woman, okay, in these settings, if you seem too strong in your point sometimes, especially if you are not agreeing with other people on said set who are not women, now you may be being aggressive. Now you ought to just be glad to be there because, it's kind of me that gave you this spot. People know who you are because why you've been on my show. That's some of the conversation that happened later. But during this show yesterday morning, I'm just tell you, it was on First Take. They're having a conversation and she's laying out the, two things can be true. The nuance of that was, let's talk about basketball. It's not as though there's this, everybody in the WNBA is gunning for Caitlin Clark. Is she a rookie that's gotten a lot of attention, some huge deals? What's different about that being her than about it when other guys have come into it, even like the NBA? They talked about Jordan in his rookie season, or LeBron James, great, or Wemby in his rookie season. People are like, yeah, they get all this conversation, but we've been here. They're not going to tank the league because of it, but are they going to? We want to show you, welcome to our league. Absolutely, that happens. The difference, too, I thought a point that was made earlier is a guy like LeBron that comes into the league as a rookie with a lot of fanfare and a lot of expectations. His stature was different. You know, a guy like Wemby, although he's light, he's thin, his stature's, he's 18 feet tall. Their stature makes it a little different. Caitlin Clark is a guard coming from college. She's going to have to get a little stronger, put a little bit of weight on her. It basically just to be strong. And I'm not talking about a lot, just a little muscle, because now she's playing in a different league and the game is different and it's been elevated. But the fact that the conversation, I mean, I've heard people yesterday, the host of the show made took it straight to the racial comment. Well, because you have this white, let's face it, this white woman coming in and she's a star and all these players are, they're jealous. I mean, it's not an exact quote, but those are words that he used closely in a sentence, right? In terms of context. Is that what we have to do? Is that, and so they're talking to Monica, who covers the WNBA and who has covered women's basketball extensively, not just for the major moments, but throughout the years. And when she tried to push back on it and said, I wouldn't say jealous. I mean, there may be some people who are, and maybe it's resentment. They wanted to make her say jealousy. They wanted to make her, you say it, it's jealousy. Say it, Monica. And I'm sitting in watching on TV going, is this really happening? Are they serious right now? You want to tell this grown woman what she should say? You're going to make her say jealousy? That's not her word. And if she's a part of this show to bring her expertise, her analysis, her context, then disagree with it, but don't try to get her not to have it. At one point, Shannon Sharpe is telling her, okay, just answer the question. No nuance, yes or no. It's a debate show. How often do y'all answer the question yet? I mean, it was so ridiculously insulting. Well, I'm going to show you a little clip of part of the conversation from yesterday, because I think let me see here if I can show you one clip, because I think it brings some. Okay. I'm going to play this clip. Just a part of the conversation. It was lengthy. Check it out.
Talking about them maximizing their great potential. And because we bring that up and talk about what potentially might get in their way, which we do to men all the time, now we got to sit up here and watch every syllable. I resent that, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, so let me. I know we got to go to break. Welcome to the world of being a woman, Stephen A., and how you have to dance about your word choice and you have to please everybody and anybody as you navigate your being. Yeah. We are talking about the world's greatest.
How about being a black man?
Oh, stop it.
Okay,
being black.
Hold on 1 second.
Have you...
So this is what I'm saying to y'all, though, and I know we got to go to break, and we didn't necessarily go there, and maybe we should. There are so many layers in this conversation around the way that it's being discussed. No. And yes, Shannon, I know y'all are going to say and Stephen A., I know you just shared that you have talked about the WNBA on your program too. You guys may not have said everybody, but the prevailing sentiment for folks that are just joining the WNBA and following women's sports is unfair to the women of this league, to your point, who have laid the groundwork for Caitlin Clark to come in and now take it to the next level. That's all I'm saying in these conversations. Kennedy Carter's behavior is not indicative of the entire league. We are still talking about competition where you are allowed to get a little extra elbow in if you are competing and you do it within the parameters of the game. The game is physical. Caitlin is helping to grow the league. These women understand that, but she cannot be babied as a rookie. That's all I'm at.
All right. Who talks about the WNBA? Who talks about women? Who talks about women's sports more than First Take?
Stephen A., respectfully, with your platform, you could have been doing this 3 years ago if you wanted to.
Wow. All right, we got to go. You guys.
So did you say
you're my guy, but
who does more than
Stephen
us?
I'm talking to you.
Wow.
Don't do that. I'm talking to you about the power that you have.
Okay.
I'm talking to you.
Okay.
Let's
You my guy, but I'm talking to you.
Guys, I really appreciate
you my girl, but you've missed a lot of episodes of First Take. You missed a lot.
Stephen A., 3 years ago, you would not talk about the W at this level. Don't do that.
Guys.
Nobody was, Monica.
Guys,
you making Stephen A. point, Monica. Monica, you making Stephen A. point.
Please let me do my job. Please let me do my job. We've gone for 40 minutes straight. It was a riveting discussion. I have to get into commercial break.
Perfect. We're talking about them maximizing their great potential.
Okay, so that is part of the conversation, right? There was a whole lot more to it. He was speechless. That's rare. And he was not happy. He complained about it. He was online last night on his podcast, calling her out. And, you know, he had to go to all the women he's had on his show. And, you know, Monica McNutt. And how do you know? Yeah, because you've seen her. I mean, it just wasn't a good look, right? It went to some whole other place. I just could not. But this morning on Get Up, Greenie, Mike Greenberg, who I think does a really good job with this show, had Monica and Rebecca Lobo on, and he wanted to allow them to have a Monica McNutt, who is an analyst and covers the WNBA, women's basketball period, but extensively, and Rebecca Lobo, who does obviously work with the WNBA, covers women's basketball, is a Hall of Famer, to talk about it. And here's, Rebecca and they had a great conversation about the nuances. And Rebecca Lobo was like, listen, this happens. Basketball is competitive. Stop acting like these women are not going to compete and that it's not physical. The physicality of the game didn't just happen. It is a competitive league. And so they had a conversation and included some of those things in terms of nuance. She also, and Mike Greenberg made this point, which I agree. He said, this is obviously a thing, right? When you have the Chicago Tribune with doing an editorial, they're not just doing it on a basketball play. They had an editorial about this topic and had a headline that called Kennedy Carter's foul on Caitlin Clark assault. And he thought that didn't, I'm going to call it irresponsible, but we see that a lot with media, and that's a whole nother show. Like, we can do that on another show, but I appreciate it. And when Mike set the conversation up, he said, listen, I've not covered the WNBA like I've covered, the NBA, the NFL, maybe even hockey for the past 35 years, not to the degree that you have. And so it would be, I'm paraphrasing here, kind of foolish for me to insert myself like I'm an authority on the WNBA when I know it from the peripheral. I appreciate that perspective. It is okay. If somebody asks me about, about soccer, I know a little about soccer. I haven't covered soccer like a lot of people who do. So I'm not going to insert myself in a conversation like a soccer expert. Can I have conversations about soccer? Absolutely. Can I cover big picture soccer stuff? But if it got to an issue about something that happened in the world of soccer, I'm not going to step in and talk to somebody who covers soccer day in, day out and make myself the authority. That's always been a problem for me. It's always been a problem. And so I appreciated that. So as I mentioned, hey, good morning. Good morning. Well, it's good to see you, my sisters. Hey, Dale, welcome. Ellen Davis Johnson, my sisters. It's always glad to have you guys in the room. So listen, as I mentioned, this is Chalk Talk over coffee because I'm going to be headed over to cover Texans minicamp this morning, but I didn't want to put this conversation off until later in the week because I thought it deserved some context. And, quite frankly, I feel qualified to add some context because I've covered the league. And it's these new fans that I'm sure women's basketball players are excited to have. But some that don't. Do you know who the leading scorers are in the WNBA right now? It's Erica Ogunbowale and Asia Wilson. Does anybody know that the Connecticut Sun is undefeated? They're 8-0. Those aren't conversations. That's the basketball part of the WNBA. But if you're just sitting around wondering what's happening with Caitlin Clark, have your favorite player, cover her, give her credit. She might be an absolutely phenomenal player at some point. But right now, it is unrealistic and is disrespectful to act like the league didn't exist and the women who have been doing things in this league have not been playing at a high level and even creating a place for her to come and land. So can she maybe elevate some things? Absolutely. Yeah, she got a $28 million shoe deal. You think some people going, man, she'd never even play bounce a basketball. She got all of this. This isn't new, but don't act like because there's women, these dynamics have never happened before. We've seen it in every league that there's been. We saw it with LeBron when he went into the NBA. We saw it with Wemby. I just need for people to stop it and understand. Hey, good morning, Don Payne. Happy belated birthday, my friend. I know I said it to you online, but it's always good to see you. First Lady Deborah Watson-Aaron, good morning. Good morning. Look at that little picture looking all angelic. I know the truth. Hey, but welcome to Chalk Talk Over Coffee. I wanted to share that. And so Stephen A. Smith, who can be nauseating, I'm just going to call it what it is. He went online and he did his show, and I'm gonna say he was whining because I can, about Monica, and he wanted to list all the women that he's had on his show. What does that sound like? I'm not racist. I have some Black friends. I mean, I'm just saying all that I've done, just stop it. They've added to your show, when you bring them on. And so you don't get some kind of big bonus. You brought on people who were more than qualified to sit in the seat and have the conversations. It's what you should do. But that conversation yesterday on First Break, it was so, I don't want to say bad. It was not a good look for Stephen A. to me. I think that's why ESPN took the whole show down. They usually they put the segments up and shows. They took it down off YouTube. You can't find it. The clip I showed you was from Twitter. And I imagine, I don't know, I don't work at ESPN, that it was probably because Stephen A. didn't want that clip up. I'm not really sure. But it was, nuance matters. Context matters. And for them to sit there and tell that grown woman, just say it. Just say this because they jealous. Jealousy's. I was like, what? All right, so Shannon Sharpe, who was a part of the conversation in a way that was condescending and ill-advised as well on yesterday, I'm going to give him a little credit because he also has a podcast that he went on last night, and he invited Monica on the podcast. And so I'm going to let you hear just a little bit of her talking about, one, that he even had her on, because, there are others who obviously would not do that. But here is Monica McNutt last night on the nightcap with Shannon Sharpe and Ocho Cinco.
I get that we are at a special place when it comes to women's basketball and the growth of the game and all of the eyeballs. I think what I was frustrated by in our conversation earlier is that we can hold more than one truth, y'all. Like the idea of some players being jealous, yes, that probably exists. But I think in Caitlin's debut, since she has made her debut, there's been a large and loud clamor or push, yes, that is Caitlin versus the W. Okay. And that is unfair. Okay. To me, yeah, jealous, sure. I mean, would you be jealous of somebody that got $28 million a shoe deal or whatever the deal is before you step foot in the pros? Right? Yeah. I just need us all to do a better job of holding room for multiple truth. Jordan as a rookie, Joe, right? LeBron as a rookie, like Wemby as a rookie. When you look at guys that have gone on to be great, I'm sure they would not say their rookie years were cakewalks. Now, in the case of LeBron, and if we use Wemby this year, they have physically dominant and powerful statures. And so maybe that has allowed them to skirt some of the curve. But Caitlin is a guard coming from college. She got to get her weight up. The W has to continue to allow her to be one of the leaders of this platform, as Angel Reese has also been, because I know that's going to be a hot topic tomorrow. And so my whole thing is just, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. But the prevailing idea that it's the W versus Caitlin and that these women don't understand the power of the eyeballs and the audience that she's helped grow the league to, that's just unfair.
So I wanted to show that because at least Shannon gave her an opportunity to further the conversation. And I didn't watch the whole show. I just saw the clip that somebody posted. which is what should happen. But my goodness, yesterday morning is why you just need different voices, and some of the people like Matt Barnes, who's a former NBA player who has a show, and he talked about how her teammates have let her down. Basically, they're like, they should be fighting, and protecting her and fighting her. So here's a couple other things to consider. We know that the women of the WNBA don't make what the men make in the NBA. That conversation has been had ad nauseum. Okay. And there's a lot of context that has to be added to that as well. Where's the money come from? It's about revenue. So they play fewer games. So are you suggesting that now the women should all be fighting and risking game checks? I mean, then what are we going to say about the league? These women are fighting because Caitlin Clark is, it's just too much. It's just, when I hear things from Matt Barnes or even a Charles Barkley, and I'm not even going to show you any Charles because I just try not to do that here, that talk about something on a superficial level, but want to act as though there's depth. I think you're doing a disservice, even though you guys are trying to hold up and highlight Caitlin Clark. You're doing a disservice to her, and quite frankly, it's a physical sport, and she's going to have to, not whine about it. The refs, I'm sure, are going to pay closer attention. But these are not new things. If I were to go back and pull video and highlights from over the years of the WNBA, there have been these kind of plays that have happened. And so let's not make it as though Caitlin Clark is this, she's a special player. We're giving her that. But don't act like the league wouldn't exist without her. And don't act like the women who are there, who are playing and doing some really great things, can't be nothing unless Caitlin, leads them to greatness. I just think it's a false narrative. Let me just say it this way. It's a lie. It's not the truth. I hate that thing, false narrative. It's just not the truth. And if you're going to tell the story and you're going to have the conversations, then be able to have the conversations. And one of the things I say sometimes, and even in some of my talks, is yes and. It doesn't have to be either or. It's yes and. Yes, this happened and this is true. And we need to be able to have that kind of conversation around Caitlin Clark and what's happening with the WNBA. It is not Caitlin versus the W. I think that's really well said. I'm going to put a pin in that for a moment. We're going to get back to it because Kris Garner of the Houston Roundball Review is going to jump on and join me for a few minutes. But I want to put a pin in it and go and talk about the Houston Astros, right? The Astros have lost they're 4-6 over the last 10 games. They won last night, right? I'm going to pull up the record just because. And they play the St. Louis Cardinals at home. It was a fun game, actually. That final was 7-4. And what is this? So a few things happened in last night's game. Yainer Diaz, the catcher that everybody's been excited about. Hey, good morning, Charles. It's good to see you. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Yainer Diaz finally got back on the board in terms of hitting home runs. He was last year in his rookie season. He was a guy that was kind of known for his offense, and he had not hit a home run since April 11th, maybe. So he did get on the board last night. That was big. Jordan Alvarez hit a home run. So those were obviously helpful. Justin Verlander got the start, gave up some runs early. Rafael Montero came in out of the bullpen, pitched well, and Josh Hader shut it down in the ninth and got the win. So, the Astros have been interesting, right? In terms of, let me go back to the standings. So they are 4-6. They're 27-34. They're 7 games under 500. And they've had some challenges, right? Last night, one of the best players on the team, Kyle Tucker, was at the plate and hit himself in his shin. The ball hit off his shin and he had to leave the game. The good news is X-ray showed that nothing was broken They're calling it a shin contusion. So hopefully he's not out too long. But the good news is he didn't break anything, because when it happened, it looked like, wow, this could be something. So the Astros at 27-34 are 7 games behind Seattle in the division. And I know it's early and you're probably saying, Kim, why are we talking about it's just June? Because at some point you got to start inching up, right? 7 games can be made up, but you can't be, 4-6 out of 10 games. You're going to have to start winning more series. And so we've talked about that throughout the season. Jose Abreu is back. And let me go back to, he is back. What did he do last night? He came in as a pinch hitter last night, I believe, when I saw him. Yep, he's hitting 115. Remember, he had a stint for about a month where he was away, maybe 3 or 4 weeks where he was away, going to work on his timing, right? His not really his bat speed, but just really his timing, the see it, hit it kind of thing. But you got some other people who are still, doing really well. Singleton played at first base. He was 0 for 2 last night. He had 2 strikeouts and a walk. Pena was 1 for 3. Altuve was 1 for 5 with an RBI. Alvarez had 2 RBIs. He had a good night at the plate. He was 2 for 3, 2 runs scored, 2 RBIs, a double, and a home run. Probably one of his best nights of the season. He needed that. And the Astros needed the win. So what is happening with the Astros? When I talk about this media situation and how we talk about and cover things, last night, before I'm able to, get home and watch the game, I'm listening to a local sports talk radio show. I had to turn it off. I got to go listen to politics because the Astros game hadn't started yet. I couldn't listen to it. I'm like, so here we are in June, and somehow there are people in the local media still find a way to blame Dusty Baker for some of the things happening with this team. So Dusty Baker, let me get this right. Each year that he was here, the team went to the ALCS. They went to the World Series twice, and they actually won it in 2022. But Dusty's a problem. And here's a conversation. And so, Charles, you'll appreciate this because I know you have followed Dusty for many years too, and Don, and many of you will as well. The conversation was something like this, talking about why some players are here and why some aren't. They're mad about Rafael Montero being here. They shouldn't have re-signed him. They should have made the trade for Contreras last year. But because Dusty has cozied up to Jim Crane, the owner, Jim Crane gave Dusty more credit and input than the general manager. So let me just stop right there. Dusty Baker. Do y'all know who Dusty Baker is? So now he cozying up to Jim Crane? That ain't who Dusty Baker has ever positioned and purported himself to be. That ain't Dusty Baker. Oh, that's right, but you never really covered the team. You listened to the one guy, Chandler Rome, who everybody knew was not a big fan of Dusty Baker's. And that's the narrative that you're still talking about on these airwaves, like you know it. That's a problem for me, y'all. And not just because I like Dusty, but because you're not really covering the team like that. You got one source, and it's a journalist. That can't really be your source if you're doing this thing the right way. You may get some input from people who are there a lot, but you need some sources inside the organization. When I talk about people I talk to in the organization, I'm not talking about other journalists. I don't have a problem giving journalists credit from conversations I may have. I'm not the beat writer for the Astros. The beat writer is a person who's there day in, day out, on the road, everywhere. I'm not that person. Am I there a lot? Do I also know people in the organization that can provide some other context? Absolutely. But I'm just going to tell you that if we talking about Dusty being a problem with this, blaming Dusty for something in June of 2024, yeah. Let me just say this before I bring in our guests so we can get back to this basketball conversation and also preview the NBA Finals. if that's where you're going, this team has no shot. Maybe you need to look at how analytics is being used, even to the extent of putting together lineups. I think the players really like Joe Espada. I think, how do you not like Joe? He's a likable guy. And they like Dusty. They also respected Dusty. With that, I'm going to bring in my guest that I'm super excited to have with me, who just agreed at the last minute this morning to come on, because I decided I didn't want to push the show to later in the week, so I had to get it early so I could still get over to the Texans. So welcome, Kris Garner.
Good morning.
Good morning. Of the Houston Roundball review, you've seen Kris here before. Hopefully you followed his work. He is an expert on all things basketball, and not just the Houston Rockets and the Houston Cougars. He does obviously cover those teams, the NBA, he covers college basketball, but he also covers women's college basketball and the WNBA, and has been, I think we probably met covering the NBA and WNBA all those years ago. So Kris, I was talking earlier. I played a clip from my First Take yesterday with that nonsense that was going on with Stephen A. Smith. That's all I can call it. It is what it is. And then I did play a clip with Monica McNutt, who was on the Nightcap with Shannon Sharp last night, and kind of talking about the point she was making. But I wanted to get your thoughts and input on this conversation around Caitlin Clark and what she means to the WNBA and how it's being covered.
She brings more eyeballs to the league, more attention from folks who never saw the WNBA in the previous 27 years. So some of those folks act like this is the first year of the WNBA,
right?
Which is false, clearly. You and I go back to the Houston Comet days, when the Comets dominated the WNBA for 4 straight years, winning 4 straight championships.
Right.
But some of these Caitlin Clark fans are in the media.
Yeah.
So their perspective is skewed right there from Jump Street. Caitlin Clark is a very talented player, but she's also a rookie. So she's going to struggle like almost every rookie does, and almost every person in any profession does in their first year on the job. You're going to struggle. So these expectations that some folks have for her to just revolutionize the WNBA was ludicrous.
Yeah.
These folks talking about they should let her shine, almost let her win, let her follow the script like this is wrestling. This is not wrestling.
Right.
So let her, and she's still putting up good numbers.
Yeah.
Despite shooting poorly from the floor. But you know me for a long time. Like I said, we go back to the Comet days. I've followed women's hoops going on 30 years.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not these guys, and I'm speaking from a male perspective, because you're a woman, you can talk from a female perspective. I'm not one of these dudes who just discovered the WNBA yesterday. Okay. I've seen the struggles. I've seen the empty crowds, empty arenas. And covering H-Town college teams, I see that a lot of empty arenas. Okay, so I know from where I'm coming from. So this is just, I mean, Stephen A., and he seems shocked. And then, I guess, on his own platform, he was more critical of Monica. Like, folks did not know who Monica was before being on his show. Oh man,
right?
Your stuff stinks too. Okay? You're not the only person who has a platform. Monica played ball.
Right.
Monica works the Knicks games.
She's a part of their analyst. She's an analyst for the New York Knicks.
So people know who she is. Mr. New York Knicks fan, number 2 behind Spike Lee, number 1. Monica didn't fall off the truck yesterday. One of her points was, Stephen A., with your platform.
Right.
Why did you wait for Caitlin Clark to come to the league to start putting a shine on women's hoops?
And that really is what silenced him, right? That was the thing that he was, and I played the clip a little bit earlier before you got on. He was offended by, I mentioned, Kris, that we covered the WNBA. I actually was a part of the Comets broadcast team for 2 of their championship seasons. And I reminded the audience how the stadium, the Summit, back then, which then is now Lakewood, but that's where the Rockets played and the Comets played. They used to sell it out.
Yes.
It was packed. It was rocking. It was excitement. It was competitive. I mean, the league has had ebbs and flows. They've had some big eyeballs on them different times. We can't forget about the women who've come along and been amazing for this game. But this, Kris, is where sports and society do meet.
Yes.
And the new people who are coming to the league that don't really know much about it, and like you said, fans, many of them are fans in the media, they're doing a disservice to the league and actually to their girl Caitlin Clark, right? They really are. And so she's not going to be the savior. Even the conversation about how, that she's going to get them charter flights. Well, the league's been working on charter flights for 5 years.
Correct.
They didn't just say, well, we have a check now. We'll just write it because it'll make Caitlin Clark more comfortable. That's ridiculous to not add the nuance when you have these conversations.
And the folks who talk about who watches, well, clearly you're younger than 30.
Right?
Because in the first few years when the W was on NBC, and yes, part of the NBA package as well, the 10 highest rated games in WNBA history are from those first 4 years of the league.
Yeah.
And the Houston Comets are in 7 of those 10. In ratings, we're talking 3, 4, 5 million people watch those games. So ESPN now is 1 million, 2 million, and yes, the Final Four last year, final matchup, got the 9.9 million. That's when people realize, oh, wow, you mean folks watch women's basketball? Yes. It's what women have been saying for years. If you promote us, cover us, market us, people will start paying attention. One of the reasons why I began covering women's basketball because I believe that these women deserve attention as well. That's where I start. I still get, I still get eyeballs and eye rolls. Bro, why you waste your time covering women's basketball?
Right.
No one cares about that. No one. I still do it because I enjoy it, and they deserve the recognition that these guys have gotten for years.
Right.
Well,
Kris, and I know that some people may not know this. You will cover if you have to pick because of location, you're going to cover the women's Final Four before you cover the men's Final Four, and you have for years.
Yes.
As long as I've known you.
Yes. And because that's what got my foot in the door initially. And ironically, I got my first credential to the women's Final Four through a connection from the Houston Comets.
Right.
A staffer on the Comets was friends with someone within the NCAA league office. And that person in the league office recommended, yo, man, you should apply for a credential to cover the women's Final Four. I had never thought about that until he put that seed in my head. Fast forward 25 years ago.
Is an issue.
Right. So fast forward 25 years later, I've been covering the women's Final Four ever since then.
So, Kris, I thought it was important, this morning I thought Mike Greenberg, who I actually like as a journalist, did a really good job. Obviously that was the biggest story of the day yesterday, right? And so he brought Rebecca Lobo on and Monica McNutt, who will probably never be on First Take again. I don't know. Maybe she's on this morning. I doubt it, but
I doubt it. Yeah.
I doubt it because Steve is petty like that. But to have a conversation and the way he set it up, which is what I appreciate about him. He said, listen, I have covered like the NBA and the NFL, and maybe he said hockey or baseball for 35 years. And so I know, and I'm not going to pretend I know the WNBA, women's basketball, like I know those sports. So I want to bring in the people who do this up close and personal to further the conversation. And so he got it, he set it up. And they had a conversation, but he made also a very good point. And, Rebecca talked about, it's basketball and she mentioned that file that Kennedy Carter made on Caitlin Clark. I'm sure at some point, maybe Kennedy Carter may say, I wish I hadn't done it. I don't know her, but that's like the kind of file you want, right?
Right.
It was elevated to a flagrant one.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rebecca said, what people may not know is in all of last year, there was 65 flagrant fouls in the WNBA. It's not like it's never happened. Stop acting like there's not a level of competition. But here's what Mike Greenberg added. He talked about, obviously, it's a place where sports and society meet. That the Chicago Tribune did an editorial. They obviously aren't doing an editorial just about the basketball part of it, but the headline, in the headlines, it called what Kennedy Carter did to Caitlin Clark an assault. And that's, I think that's irresponsible and that's wrong. And it's that kind of thing. And you mentioned from media that is adding fuel to this thing, you know, this poor white girl, because that's what Stephen A said, coming into this league and they're not being nice enough to her and they're jealous of her. Stop it. It's too much. But that is an issue. And I'm glad he called out the Chicago Tribune.
And it's, you know, and to the folks who say, oh, well, you know, America isn't racist. I'm colorblind and all that doesn't exist anymore. And my response to them now is, well, you let me see how far you get with some yellow money.
Right.
Since you're colorblind. So, okay, with that. But women's basketball is competitive.
Yeah.
Girls basketball is competitive, has always been. Since I've grassroots, AAU, whatever you want to call it. I've seen young ladies throw hands on the court. I've heard them drop words that I didn't for a while because I was, you know, I started covering it at 30 years ago. I was naive. Let me be clear. I was naive. And I heard these young ladies talking like dudes on the court, cussing them out and use profanity. I'm like, what is this? Then I realized that's part of who they are, part of basketball, part of competition.
Part of competition.
But Kennedy Carter, for those who've known her for a while, have seen her hoop for years, like I saw hoop at A&M.
That's how she plays.
That's who she is. That doesn't make it right. It was a cheap shot that she did against Caitlin Clark. She should have just gave Caitlin Clark buckets and to talk smack to her every time she scored on her, rather than hit her with a shove in the back. That's how she should have handled it.
But that's one of the things Monica tried to say yesterday. This is how she plays, right? It's like if we were talking in the NBA and a play happened with Pat Beverly, we go, that's who he is.
Right.
We're not saying it's right, but you know, if you cover it, the key is if you cover it and you've been covering it, that's how he plays. And so that is what Kennedy Carter, that's who she's always been, doesn't make it right. But you've got to, I just think it's important to kind of know what your lane is.
Yes.
Right? You've got to know what your lane is, and you owe it to the audience and you owe it to the leagues. And I'm just going to say Caitlin Clark, because y'all don't care about the other women, clearly, to cover it with a little more context. And don't tell Monica McNutt when you're sitting there, no nuance. I mean, they talked to her like she was a child. Now, she was good. I don't need to defend Monica McNutt. She's solid. She's respected, and she handled herself accordingly. And that was a problem because, you know, Stephen A wanted to act like, well, nobody really knew who she was. You know who she is because she's on First Take. Maybe it's because she's a part of the New York Knicks. That's a pretty big market, right? Yeah. That Madison Square Garden network. They're pretty big. They're pretty big. She's a part of their broadcast team. So, and she's not just on First Take. She's on Get Up. She's on WNBA games. She's been known in the DMV for years. I just don't reduce her to just what you think she should be and like you've done her some kind of favor.
She's worked college games. She's worked pro games on other networks besides MSG, all those things. And why are people trying to defend Caitlin Clark, like protect Caitlin Clark, like she's fragile, like she's gonna break? She's hooped. She's competitive. I think she has a brother, at least one. So she's probably played ball with boys before.
And she brings that kind of energy. That's how she played in college.
Yes. So
she was physical. She's just smaller and she's not as experienced yet as the women in the WNBA. That's all.
That's all. So she does not need all this. Don't put her in bubble wrap. Don't coddle her. Okay. But to that extent, she also said, I think 2 weeks ago after one of the games, and they played a lot of games. They played more games than any other team in the league, which is a shame on the W as well. Right. The league is not faultless in this either.
They're not. They pimping her.
But Caitlin said in the last few weeks, as the face of the league, which she did not ask for that. It was thrust upon her.
Right.
She has spent more time talking to the media than her own family.
Yeah.
That's too much. Okay, that's too much. She has a life. She is a human being. She has family, siblings, a life.
Yeah.
Yes, the W, it's her job, not profession, but a work-life balance should apply for all of us. I don't want to take up anybody's time. And folks who don't know, like about Asia Wilson,
Right.
she's not new to the league.
Wale, right?
Enrique, all these folks. And Diana Taurasi is still giving people buckets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, she's almost 42 years old, still giving buckets. I remember her back at UConn. That's how old I am. And sorry, Dee, that's how old you are now as well. When Rebecca Lobo with the Comets. That's when I first met her covering the Comets.
Covering the Comets, yeah. When
So
she was with the New York Liberty. Yep.
This all connects. So I go back to it, and I'm not trying, because it's all about context and nuance. I'm not trying to beat. I'm not bragging. But there are men in media, women's hoops media, that know the game a hell of a lot more than Stephen A. Smith, Jeff Teague, Pat McAfee,
Charles Barkley,
Paul Pierce, those dudes.
Yeah, Matt Barnes.
So they got a bigger platform than I do, than we do.
Right.
But I'm thankful you give me a chance to let folks introduce folks who may not know who I am. After this time, hello. I've done this.
Well, you've been here before, but
been on 30 years. But yes, a lot of those folks, and it's weird. In some circles, some people know me more for my coverage of women's hoops than my coverage of the Rockets. Some think, well, KG, he just covers women. Other circles, KG just covers the Cougs.
Right.
So I cover hoops.
People see it from their perspective, from what is important to them.
Yes.
Right. And that's what we're seeing, what's happening with this coverage of the WNBA. And Zena, one of my best friends, Zena Garrison, we were talking about this, and she's been annoyed by the conversations around it. And she's like, well, maybe this is a time that the coverage of women's sports will really take another step. And it might, it has to be sustained, but it's not productive. Some of the conversations from the people who are not really, I'm going to say not really qualified. They could be if they put the work in, but right now they're not. And it matters. Just like I wouldn't sit around and talk about the Texans to the level I do if I wasn't there covering them and could talk about the nuance, not just from stuff I'd seen from the surface, catch the occasional television. Oh, last year they played well, they got to a playoff. I'm looking at it. No, you've got to cover it. You've got to know the players, the coaches, the people, the history, the other people in the league. You got to know those things to be able to really do your audience a service. And that's what you do with the Roundball Review. And I appreciate you jumping on this morning for Chalk Talk over coffee.
Thank you. And it's also part of new media.
It is
new media today is full of young and old, because they have the platform and technology to share their thoughts and opinions. And some of those opinions are misinformed or uninformed.
Right.
But they're just opinions. They're not credentialed media.
Right.
And I'm going to say this, the WNBA and heck, the NBA to an extent, because years ago, we've been around long enough to know the league, the NBA did not credential bloggers.
Right.
They frowned on those, in their mind, fan sites.
Right.
Because they did not want those fans to form opinions because they were not informed opinions. But then they realized at a certain time, they're getting a lot of eyeballs, a lot of views, a lot of clicks. So maybe we should bend our rules and start giving them credentials to come to the game, to cover the games. But those sites are still fan sites. They still come across as fans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of the Rockets.
Right.
Okay. I cover the Rockets.
I cover the Rockets. I cover the Texans.
I'm a fan of the Detroit Pistons, but I don't cover the Pistons. I may maintain objectivity. Yes, I'm a UH alum, but you ask many of the UH administrators.
Right. He covers them.
I cover them, and I call it like it is.
He does do that.
Okay. I don't blow smoke up anybody's behind over there on Holman. From president on down. Tillman, too. And Tillman, by the way, when are you going to bring a WNBA team back to H-Town? Just saying. All this attention, publicity that the league's getting now, you need to be part of that, Tillman.
You need to be part of that.
Just saying.
Well, Kris, before I let you go, I appreciate you this morning. Tell people where they can follow you, the Houston Roundball Review. If they're not already subscribed and watching, they should be.
Thank you as always, sis. Houston Roundball Review on YouTube, Threads, Spoutable, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook page as well, Houston Roundball Review. I'm way more active on those platforms than I am on Twitter. But so, yes, Houston Roundball Review on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Try to put up new content almost daily now with the reels and the shorts, all those things. Subscribe. Click on that bell so you receive notification when I post new content. You see I'm wearing one of my Houston Roundball Review cap.
I
got the merch too, so get you some merch as well. But spread the word. And I'm happy to say, as you know, I don't just cover H-Town teams.
Right.
So the Rockets are in the playoffs. They did not make the playoffs. I think this might be the last year they don't make the playoffs from some fork playing next season. But last month on my YouTube channel, Anthony Edwards videos, Caitlin Clark videos, those got thousands, hundreds or thousands of views. So it's not just H-Town teams. Like I said, sum it up. I cover hoops.
Right. You cover hoops. Hey, before I let you go, we do have to talk a little bit about that other league, the NBA. So the finals kick off this week. Boston and Dallas. I think this time last year, if somebody had said, Boston probably, the Dallas Mavericks might get to, they'll probably be in the championship. I'd have been like, man, Kris, what you on, dude? I know you know basketball, but are you seeing something I don't see? So what they have done, the evolution of this version of Kyrie Irving, you have to give him credit for his growth and maturity. Mm-hmm. And I think on paper, nobody would have picked them. I think they got a shot.
Oh, they have a shot. I have it going 7. I'm picking Boston.
Yeah.
Objectively, I'm picking Boston in 7. I would not be shocked if Dallas wins the series.
Right.
But as a Houstonian and a proud Houstonian, warts and all, I just can't pick a team from Dallas to win. I just can't.
Well, I have a lot of family in Dallas, and my cousin was here this past weekend, and she asked me, when now the Rockets on in, can you pull for I got some kind of pull, for the Mavericks. And listen, I would not be mad with seeing Dallas win and see Kyrie, this iteration of Kyrie, get a championship. I think if Kristaps Porzingis is really healthy, I don't really know that Dallas has an answer for that. But taking nothing from Luka because he's a bad dude, and
he is.
Kyrie have been amazing together. I think it's going to be a fun series, and I, like you, Kris, think it's going 7.
I hope it's I hope it lives up to the hype.
Yeah.
Show my age. I remember years ago, Jason Kidd at Cal.
Yeah.
Came to H-Town to play against TSU. That's when I first saw Jason Kidd hoop. So that's how old I am, and that's how old Jason Kidd is as well. But when it comes down to coaching, he has the advantage.
I do think you make a great point, Kris, and I'm glad you said that. The difference in this team, I think Jason Kidd has navigated this really well. You had 2 players. Once you get the personality stuff, like who is Kyrie going to be, do you have enough balls to go around? Because both he and Luka are used to having the ball in their hands. Well, you got the head coach, who's a guy who was used to having the ball in his hands, and he has managed this situation really well, and it's worked. And now they are playing for a championship.
So good luck to both teams. I hope it's competitive. I hope there's no injuries that either way in the series. And I hope it goes 7. But I hope I'm trying to be objective, but also ties into my Detroit Pistons fandom. I got to stick with a team from the Eastern Conference. I just got to do that too as well. But objectively, Boston, and honestly, it. Everybody knows who's watched basketball.
Yeah.
Boston's up and down. They take quarters off. They take halves
off.
They take games off.
Sometimes.
So that is a concern too, obviously.
Yeah.
But maybe if they stay locked in and focused because of who they're playing, we might get the best version of the Boston Celtics in this series.
And with that, we are out of time. Thank you, Kris Garner. I'm headed over to Texans minicamp. I'll be posting stuff on the platforms later today. I'll be there today and tomorrow. And we'll continue to talk about what's happening in the WNBA and the W, as they want to call it. And I love it how, to bring it back full circle, Monica McNutt said, don't make it like it's Caitlin versus the W. Don't do that. That's not productive for her, for the league, or for any of the women who've been doing the work for decades.
Tell AD Moore I said hi.
All right, I will. Thank you so much. That's going to do it for us today, everybody. I'll see you next time, next week on, I was going to say Beyond the Headlines, my old show from Channel 2. Next week on Chalk Talk. Peace.